Every morning, before the sun touched the playground, a man with a broken backpack drew circles on the pavement. His hands were red from the cold, his breath white against the dawn. He crouched near the park bench, the one he called his classroom, and began to write, the chalk scraping softly over the concrete. A, B, C. He always started with the alphabet. The letters looked uneven, trembling slightly under his fingers, but to the children who gathered around him, they were perfect. To them, he wasn't a stranger. He was Mr. Daniel, their teacher. From a distance, people saw only another homeless man sitting in the park. Most didn't notice the small crowd of children around him, sitting cross-legged on cardboard pieces, notebooks open on their knees. They didn't hear his voice calm, deep, patient, as he explained why the word kind was more powerful than the word smart. He never raised his tone. He never hurried. Each lesson began the same way, with a smile and a phrase that belonged entirely to him. Learning doesn't need a classroom, just an open heart. That morning was colder than usual. Frost painted the swings in silver, and the benches wore thin coats of ice. Daniel rubbed his palms together, blew on them, and kept writing. His jacket was torn at the elbow, and the fabric around the collar had turned gray from years of wear. Still, he stood tall in spirit, if not in body. The children didn't seem to notice the holes in his gloves or the thinness of his scarf. To them, Mr. Daniel was magic, the man who could make numbers sound like stories, and stories sound like hope. "All right, who can tell me the capital of France?" he asked, tapping the chalk against the pavement. A dozen small hands shot up. "Me! Me, Mr. Daniel!" one girl shouted. Her name was Rosie. She was 7, with tangled curls and a laugh that could melt winter. "Paris!" she said proudly. Daniel clapped softly. "Very good, Miss Rosie. And what's the capital of kindness?" The children paused, confused. Then Jamie, the smallest boy in the group, whispered, "The heart?" Daniel's smile deepened. "Exactly," he said. "And class? That's the only capital that never runs out." When the lesson ended, the children packed their things, some slipping small candies or pieces of bread into Daniel's hands. "Mama said you should eat this," Rosie told him one morning, handing him half a sandwich. "Tell your mama she's an angel," Daniel said. He always did. He watched them run back to their homes, their laughter echoing between the bare trees. When the last of them disappeared, he sat back against the bench, the chalk still warm from his touch. He stared at the faint white marks on the ground and whispered to himself, "Still teaching, still worth it." By the time the city fully woke, Daniel had packed his classroom, just a box of chalk, a few worn notebooks, and an old thermos. He slung the backpack over his shoulder and walked toward the soup kitchen. He greeted the volunteers by name. They all knew him. "Morning, Professor," one of them said teasingly. He smiled. "Morning, Angie. I'll take the lesson special. No onions." They laughed. Daniel always brought warmth wherever he went, even if he had none left for himself. People respected him, though most didn't know his story. They only knew that he taught every single day. He'd been coming to that park for nearly 2 years. Nobody remembered exactly when he'd appeared. One day he was just there sitting on the bench, reading a tattered dictionary under the elm tree. The next day, he was surrounded by children. Parents assumed he was a volunteer. Then they noticed the sleeping bag under the bench, the worn shoes, the way he disappeared when it rained. That's when they realized he wasn't there to help himself. He was there to help them. And yet, no one ever asked why. At night, when the park emptied and the lights dimmed, Daniel sat beneath the overhang near the playground, wrapping himself in an old blanket. He'd trace invisible words on the ground with his finger, spelling out lessons he planned for tomorrow. "Tomorrow we'll learn about the planets," he'd whisper. "Maybe I'll tell them Jupiter's the protector, just like parents are." The stars above flickered faintly, and he smiled to himself. "Still learning," he murmured. The wind answered softly, rustling the pages of the small notebook he kept in his coat pocket. That notebook was his treasure. Inside were years of handwritten lessons, quotes, names of students he once taught in real classrooms. The first page was the most worn. To Mr. Daniel Clark, with gratitude, class of 1988. The ink had faded, but the memory hadn't. He ran his fingers across the letters every night, remembering each face, each laugh, each promise made in a life that now felt borrowed from someone else. Sometimes he wondered what had happened to them, his old students. Did they remember him? Would they recognize him now? Probably not. Maybe that was for the best. Before all this, Daniel had been one of the city's best teachers. His classroom had been full of light windows covered in art, desks scattered with books. He'd taught history and literature, always finding ways to make his students feel the lessons. When he spoke about courage, he read letters from soldiers. When he spoke about compassion, he told stories about his late wife, Anna, who'd been a nurse. "Teach them to care," she used to say. "The world's full of smart people who forgot how." After she died, something in him broke quietly, like chalk against pavement. The school tried to help. They offered time off, counseling, kindness. But grief is a slow storm. It didn't take his job, it took his will. One missed day became 2, then a week. Bills piled up. He stopped answering calls. When the eviction notice came, he didn't fight it. He just packed what mattered: his notebook, his chalk, Anna's photograph, and walked out. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd find a way back. But months turned into years. The city swallowed him like it had so many others, quietly, without malice, without memory. He never begged. He couldn't. Instead, he gave what he had left, lessons. It started one summer when he saw a group of kids skipping school, wandering the park with nothing to do. He'd smiled and said, "If I teach you something cool, will you promise to stay out of trouble?" They laughed, but stayed. By the end of the day, they knew how to multiply fractions and draw constellations. "Can you come tomorrow?" one boy had asked. Daniel nodded, and from that day, the park became his classroom. Some parents worried at first. "He's a stranger," they whispered, but the children insisted. "He's nice," Rosie said. "He knows everything." One afternoon, a mother finally watched from afar. She saw Daniel crouched on the ground, teaching her daughter to spell dream. His hands trembled as he drew the letters. When the lesson ended, he bowed slightly, as if the pavement itself were sacred. That mother cried quietly behind a tree. The next day, she brought chalk, a whole box. "For your lessons," she said. He smiled. "Then today's lesson is gratitude." But not everyone understood. Some people complained. "He's loitering," a jogger muttered. "Makes the park look bad." Others rolled their eyes. "What's he even teaching them? He's homeless." Daniel heard it all. He never responded. Instead, he kept teaching, even when his fingers went numb, even when his stomach growled. "You teach for free?" a passerby asked once. Daniel smiled softly. "No, they pay me with smiles." The man laughed, not understanding. Daniel didn't explain. Some currencies don't fit in wallets. Every few weeks, a park officer would check on him. "You doing okay out here, sir?" "Always," Daniel would reply. He never asked for pity, only peace. Most officers left him alone. He wasn't causing trouble. But one winter morning, a new young officer approached with a clipboard. "You can't keep setting up here," he said firmly. Daniel looked up from his chalk lines. "Children learn better outdoors," he said. "It's not about that, sir," the officer replied. "It's policy." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then maybe the policy needs a lesson." The officer frowned. That was the first spark of conflict. The next day, Daniel taught as usual. But his movements were slower, heavier. The idea of being forced away from the park weighed on him. "What's wrong, Mr. Daniel?" Rosie asked. He smiled faintly. "Nothing a good question won't fix. Now who can tell me what justice means?" The children thought hard. One boy said, "It's when you get what's fair." Daniel nodded. "And what if fair looks different to everyone?" The park breeze stirred his hair as he added softly, "Then we listen until it sounds the same." That night, he stayed awake, sitting by the playground, watching the stars blink through the bare branches. He remembered standing in a classroom, chalk in hand, talking about freedom and dignity. He'd told his students once, "A teacher's job isn't to fill your head, it's to keep your light alive." He sighed. "Looks like mine's still burning, Anna," he whispered to the photo in his pocket. The city lights flickered far away, distant but beautiful. Somewhere, an owl called. Daniel smiled. Still learning, he murmured again his nightly prayer. The following morning, the young officer returned, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Clark," he said, reading from the badge, "you're not allowed to conduct gatherings without a permit." "A gathering?" Daniel asked softly. "Is that what they call children learning now?" "Sir, please understand. I'm just doing my job." Daniel nodded. "And I'm doing mine." The officer hesitated. "You'll need to move on." Daniel looked at the half-drawn words on the pavement. "Hope, kindness, tomorrow." "If I move on," he said quietly, "who will teach them those?" The officer said nothing. Then, quietly, he walked away. For a few days, Daniel continued as usual. The officer didn't return, and he thought perhaps the moment had passed. But he knew better. Trouble always came slowly, like winter storms. Still, he refused to let the children see his worry. "What's our word of the day?" he asked them one morning. "Courage," they shouted. "And what does courage mean?" "Doing what's right," Rosie said. "Even when it's hard," Jamie added. Daniel nodded, pride glimmering in his tired eyes. "Then today," he said, "we practice what we preach." When the lesson ended that afternoon, Daniel sat alone on the bench, the chalk crumbling between his fingers. He watched the faint outlines of the words they'd written, courage, heart, learn, slowly fade under the wind. His stomach ached with hunger, but his spirit was full. Somewhere deep inside, he felt that the world was about to change again, maybe for the worse, maybe for the better. Either way, he was ready. Because a true teacher doesn't stop when the bell rings. He stops when there's no one left to learn. The next morning, the sky was gray, the kind of gray that promised snow. Daniel stood by the park bench, chalk already dusting his gloves. He'd slept little. Every sound in the night, footsteps, sirens, the wind scraping through the trees had carried the same fear. They'll make me leave. Still, he was there. The children came running, scarves flapping, cheeks red. "Morning, Mr. Daniel," Rosie shouted. He smiled, as if nothing were wrong. "Morning, class." Today we learn about standing tall, even when the wind blows. They didn't know he was teaching himself, too. Halfway through the lesson, a shadow crossed the pavement. Daniel looked up to see the young officer again, same uniform, same clipboard, but this time with another man beside him, older, heavier, wearing a badge that gleamed even in the dull light. "Mr. Clark," the older man said, "we've received complaints." Daniel straightened slowly. "Complaints about what?" "About you conducting classes without permission, blocking public walkways." Daniel looked at the small semicircle of children. "I suppose laughter counts as obstruction now?" The officer shifted awkwardly. The older man didn't smile. "You'll need to stop, sir." The children fell silent. Rosie's lip trembled. "He's not doing anything bad," she said. "He's teaching us." The older man frowned. "Miss, go home to your parents." Daniel raised a hand gently. "It's all right, Rosie." Then to the man he said, "You can't take away their right to learn." "No one's taking anything," the man said flatly. "But rules are rules." Daniel's eyes softened. "Rules without compassion make prisoners of good men." The younger officer looked down, guilt flickering across his face. "Please, sir," he murmured. "Just move on for today." Daniel sighed. "For today," he said quietly. That evening, Daniel sat under the park's overhang, watching his chalk dust blow away like smoke. He wasn't angry. He'd seen too much of the world to waste energy on anger. But he was tired of fighting systems that never saw hearts, only paperwork. He opened his notebook, flipping to the first page. "To Mr. Daniel Clark, with gratitude, class of 1988. He smiled faintly. "Would you have given up, kids?" he whispered. The stars were hidden behind clouds, but he imagined their answers anyway. "Never, Mr. Clark. Not ever." The next day, he returned. He always did. This time, he taught quietly, using a stick instead of chalk, drawing in the thin layer of snow. "If they erase chalk," he said softly, "we'll write with frost." The children giggled. "What if it melts?" Jamie asked. "Then we'll start again," Daniel said. "That's what learning is, beginning again, no matter how many times the lesson disappears." Behind the fence, a woman stood watching, phone in hand. She was new, tall, wearing a red scarf. She didn't look angry. She looked curious. Then she smiled and began recording. Later that afternoon, Daniel approached the soup kitchen. Angie, the volunteer, handed him a bowl of stew. "They've been talking about you, you know," she said. "Who?" "The kids' parents. Some think what you're doing is beautiful. Others, not so much." Daniel nodded. "That's education, Angie. You can't teach without stirring a few minds." She chuckled. "You're something else, Professor." He smiled, though a flicker of worry crossed his face. "They're coming for me again, aren't they?" Angie's expression softened. "Just promise me you'll be careful." "Always am," he said. But they both knew that wasn't true. By Friday, word had spread. A few parents came to watch, standing at a distance. They saw the way Daniel spoke, not like someone preaching, but like someone remembering. He didn't just teach math and reading. He taught dignity. "If you make a mistake," he told them, "you don't erase it. You learn from it, then you draw something new." Rosie raised her hand. "Even big mistakes?" "Especially big ones," he said. The parents exchanged glances. One mother whispered, "He's good." Another replied, "Too good. That's the problem." That afternoon, the young officer, his name was Officer Collins, returned alone. He didn't bring the clipboard this time, just a paper cup of coffee. "Cold day," he said. Daniel nodded. Every day's cold when you stand still too long. Collins hesitated. You know, sir, I used to hate school. My teacher said I'd never make anything of myself. Did you believe him? Daniel asked. For a while, Collins admitted. Then what changed? Someone else did. Daniel smiled. Then you understand my lesson better than most. Collins exhaled. I wish the city saw it that way. When Collins left, Daniel sat for a long time, his fingers tracing shapes in the snow. He didn't know why that officer's words lingered, but they did. Maybe because they reminded him of himself once young, once sure he could change everything. Now he changed what he could, one word at a time. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, he whispered, That's all any of us can do. Then, with slow, deliberate strokes, he wrote a single word in the snow, believe. The following week, the city sent a letter. Angie handed it to him with trembling hands. It came to the shelter, she said. The envelope bore the city seal. Inside was an official notice. Cease all unpermitted teaching or instructional gatherings within public spaces. He read it twice, then folded it neatly. Guess I've been promoted, he joked softly. Angie frowned. Daniel, this isn't funny. He nodded. No, but if I stop laughing, I'll stop teaching. He slipped the paper into his bag. They can stop my lessons on paper, but not in practice. Snow fell heavily that night. The park looked like a world erased white, still, pure. Daniel sat on his bench, breath clouding the air. He thought of Anna, how she used to walk through snow to reach her patients, even when she was sick herself. People need someone who shows up, she'd said. That memory pulled him to his feet. He cleared a patch of snow and began writing again, chalk squeaking faintly. The words shone pale under the streetlight. Kindness is louder than rules. He smiled. Let's see them erase that. The next morning, he woke to footsteps crunching through the snow. Dozens of them. He looked up. The children were there, bundled in coats, holding signs made from cardboard. We love our teacher. Let him stay. Behind them stood their parents. Some held coffee cups, others cameras. The woman in the red scarf, the one who'd filmed him earlier, stepped forward. Mr. Clark, she said warmly, I'm Nora. My daughter learns with you. I'm also a journalist. Daniel blinked. That explains the camera. She smiled. The city needs to hear your story. By noon, the park was buzzing. People stopped on their way to work. Some took photos. Others joined in. Nora interviewed a few parents. Why are you supporting him? She asked one father. Because he's the only teacher my son listens to, he said. He doesn't just teach reading, he teaches being good. Daniel tried to fade into the background, embarrassed. I'm not a hero, he murmured. You are to them, Nora said. And sometimes that's enough. The young officer watched from a distance, unsure whether to intervene or applaud. That afternoon, the city officials arrived, 3 men in suits, boots crunching through snow. The older man from before led them. This is out of control, he barked. He's trespassing and causing a disturbance. The parents formed a circle around Daniel. He's helping our kids, one mother said. He's breaking the law, the man replied. Then maybe, Daniel said softly, it's time the law learned something new, the crowd murmured. Nora's camera captured every word. The man's jaw tightened. Remove him, he ordered. Collins hesitated, stepping forward. Daniel met his eyes. Do what you must, he said quietly. Collins froze. The memory of his own childhood, the teacher who'd saved him, flashed in his mind. He lowered his hand. "No," he said. The older man turned, furious. "What?" "He's not hurting anyone," Collins said. "He's helping." "You're out of line, officer." Collins stood straighter. "Then maybe the line's in the wrong place." A ripple went through the crowd. Daniel smiled faintly. "Looks like today's lesson is courage." Rosie clapped. The others followed. The sound grew soft at first, then rising like a heartbeat through the cold air. That night, the video went viral. Nora's post, "The homeless teacher who wouldn't stop teaching," spread across social media. Within hours, thousands shared it. Comments flooded in. "He's what real education looks like. Give this man a classroom. He teaches more on the street than most do in schools." Daniel didn't see any of it. He was asleep under the overhang, worn out from the long day. But the world was already changing around him quietly, powerfully, like chalk lines turning into constellations. By morning, reporters filled the park. Cameras, microphones, flashing lights. Daniel blinked, confused. "I'm not a spectacle," he said softly. "You are a symbol," Nora whispered. And symbols move mountains. Children gathered behind him, holding their cardboard signs. One of them read, "Let him teach." Daniel faced the cameras, hands trembling. "I don't want fame," he said. "I just want every child to know that learning belongs to them, not to walls, not to rules, not to people like me. To them." His voice broke slightly. "That's all I've ever tried to do." The mayor issued a statement that afternoon. "We are aware of the situation regarding Mr. Daniel Clark. Our city values education and compassion. We are reviewing how to support his efforts appropriately." It was cautious, political, but it was enough to pause the eviction. Nora hugged him when she read the update. "You did it," she said. "No," Daniel replied softly. "They did. The children, the parents. I just showed up." She smiled. "That's what heroes always say." He chuckled. "Then the world needs more of them showing up." That evening, the park lights flickered to life. Snow glowed orange beneath them. Daniel picked up his chalk, the crowd gone now, replaced by quiet peace. He knelt, hands trembling, and wrote 3 words on the pavement. "Thank you, world." Then he added one more line, barely visible, fading in the cold. "Still learning." As he stood, he felt something he hadn't in years, not pride, not relief, but belonging. For the first time since Anna's death, he didn't feel invisible. When he finally sat down, the children's signs still leaned against the bench, their colors bright against the snow. He smiled, pulling out his notebook, flipping to a blank page. "Lesson for tomorrow," he wrote. "Hope," continued. Then he closed his eyes, letting the quiet wrap around him. The world had seen him now not as a man without a home, but as a man who'd built one out of hearts and words. And somewhere above the park, beyond the city lights, he imagined Anna smiling too. By morning, the park looked different. It wasn't just a playground anymore, it was a gathering place. Reporters, parents, teachers, even strangers arrived, carrying signs that read, "Let him teach." Snow crunched under boots, steam rose from coffee cups, and the sound of children's laughter mixed with camera clicks. Daniel stood near his bench, chalk box in hand, overwhelmed. "They came back," he whispered. "Of course they did," Nora said beside him. "You showed them what real learning looks like." He smiled faintly. "Then I suppose class is still in session." The city's officials arrived again, this time with the mayor himself, a man in a long coat, surrounded by aides. The crowd fell silent. Daniel stepped forward, hat in hand. "Mr. Clark," the mayor began, "your story has touched many, but we must also follow procedure." The air grew tense. Collins, the young officer, shifted nervously. Daniel nodded. "Of course. Procedure keeps the city running." He paused, then added softly, "But compassion keeps it alive." The mayor studied him for a long moment. "You believe what you're doing is right?" "No, sir," Daniel said. "I know it is." From the crowd, Rosie's small voice broke the silence. "He's my teacher," she cried. "He helps me read." Her mother stepped forward, holding Rosie's hand. "He helps all our kids," she said. "And he does it for nothing. Isn't that what community means?" The mayor hesitated. Cameras zoomed in. "Mr. Clark," he said quietly, "why here? Why not apply to teach again?" Daniel looked around at the children, their bright faces, their trust. "Because some classrooms have no walls," he said, "and some lessons can't be graded." The crowd erupted in applause. The mayor looked unsettled, moved, but unsure how to respond. Then a man's voice rose from the back. "Mr. Clark?" A figure pushed through the crowd mid-40s, wearing a worn brown coat. "You probably don't remember me," he said. Daniel squinted. "Should I?" The man smiled. "You taught me in 1995. I was the kid who couldn't sit still. You made me write an essay called What I Want to Be. I wrote, 'Not in jail.'" Daniel laughed softly. "Marcus?" The man nodded, eyes glistening. "You saved my life." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus stepped closer, voice shaking. "I'm a teacher now, because of you." He turned toward the mayor. "You want proof this man belongs in a classroom. I'm standing right here." The mayor blinked, caught between protocol and humanity. Cameras caught every word. Daniel looked down, overcome. "I just wanted you to believe in yourself," he said quietly. Marcus smiled through tears. "You did." Rosie tugged at Daniel's sleeve. "See, Mr. Daniel? You teach grown-ups too." The crowd laughed softly, their breath visible in the cold air. Suddenly, Daniel swayed. His knees buckled slightly. Marcus caught him. "Mr. Clark." He shook his head weakly. "Just tired." The crowd surged forward, concern spreading fast. Someone called for an ambulance. "No hospitals," Daniel murmured. "I'm fine." But he wasn't. Weeks of cold, hunger, and exhaustion had caught up to him. Nora knelt beside him. "Just rest," she said. "You've done enough." He looked up at the snow swirling above them, the sound of children calling his name fading into the distance. "Promise me," he whispered. "They'll keep learning." "I promise," Nora said. The paramedics arrived quickly, guiding him gently onto a stretcher. Cameras clicked as the crowd parted. Rosie ran forward, slipping something into his hand, a small piece of chalk. "So you can teach the angels," she said. Daniel smiled weakly. "Only if they behave." The crowd laughed through their tears. As the ambulance doors closed, Marcus placed a hand on the glass. "We'll take it from here, sir." Daniel mouthed a silent thank you. The siren wailed softly as it disappeared down the street, leaving behind a park full of people who suddenly realized they'd just witnessed something sacred. For 2 days, the park stood empty. No laughter, no lessons, just fading chalk lines half buried in snow. Then flowers began to appear on the bench. Notes, too. "Thank you, Mr. Daniel. You made me believe I could learn. You taught us love." Reporters covered the story non-stop. Donations poured in. Nora organized an online fundraiser for his recovery. "He gave without asking," she said on camera. "Now it's our turn. Within 24 hours, they'd raised enough for housing, medical care, and something more. A dream. When Daniel finally woke in the hospital, the room was filled with light and balloons that read, "Get well, teacher." His first thought was confusion. His second was gratitude. Nora sat by his bed, typing on her laptop. "You went viral," she said, smiling. "That sounds dangerous," he joked weakly. "Only to cynics," she replied. Then her tone softened. "The city wants to meet you. The mayor's office called." He blinked. "To arrest me?" "To honor you," he chuckled faintly. "Guess the lesson stuck." "It did," she said. "Everywhere." A week later, Daniel stood before a crowded city hall. Cameras flashed, microphones filled the air. The mayor stepped to the podium. "Today we recognize Mr. Daniel Clark," he said, "for his extraordinary dedication to education, compassion, and community." The applause was thunderous. Daniel accepted the framed certificate, his hands trembling. "I don't deserve this," he said softly. "I just taught what I know, that knowledge means nothing without kindness." He paused, scanning the faces before him. "And that every child deserves someone who believes in them, even if it's just one old man with chalk." After the ceremony, the mayor approached privately. "Mr. Clark," he said, "we'd like to offer you a position teaching at a new community center. You'd have a classroom, supplies, salary, everything." Daniel stared, speechless. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Nora whispered beside him. He laughed. "Then yes, but only if I can teach outdoors sometimes." The mayor smiled. "Deal." As he left City Hall, the cold wind met his face. It didn't sting anymore. It felt like an old friend saying, "Welcome back." The following spring, the park looked alive again. The snow had melted, revealing green grass and painted benches. A new sign stood by the entrance: Clark Community Learning Garden, where every lesson begins with love. Daniel walked beneath it slowly, tears in his eyes. Children waited by the swings, notebooks in hand. "Mr. Daniel," Rosie shouted, "you came back." He smiled. "You didn't think I'd let you skip homework forever, did you?" Laughter rippled through the group. The world had turned full circle, from chalk on pavement to hope carved in wood. His new classroom was simple, just tables, bookshelves, and a large chalkboard mounted on a fence. But to him, it was a cathedral. Every morning, he arrived early, wiping the board clean, humming softly. The same children, now joined by others, filled the space. Some adults came too, parents, retirees, even police officers. "We all could use a refresher," one joked. Daniel laughed. "Education's the only fire that warms everyone it touches." Collins, now off duty, sometimes helped set up chairs. "Still teaching, huh?" he'd say. "Always," Daniel replied. "Still learning, too." News outlets visited often, calling him the homeless teacher who changed the system. He always corrected them. "Not homeless anymore," he'd say. "Just human, like the rest of you." He kept teaching through rain and shine, never missing a day. Each lesson ended with his signature phrase: "Learning doesn't need a classroom, just an open heart." The children would repeat it together, their voices like music. And each time, Daniel felt Anna's presence, as if she stood among them, smiling. One afternoon, Rosie brought him a small box wrapped in paper. "We all got you something," she said shyly. Inside was a brand new box of chalk bright, colorful, untouched. He laughed, tears welling up. "You know," he said softly, holding a white stick between his fingers. "I've used this tool my whole life, but it's you who gave it meaning. We just wanted you to have enough," she said. "Oh, I have more than enough," he whispered. "Because of you." As years passed, Daniel became something of a local legend. School children would wave when they saw him walking through the streets. "That's Mr. Clark!" they'd shout. He always waved back, tipping his hat. Sometimes he'd sit by his old bench in the park, watching strangers read the plaque placed there. "Dedicated to the man who taught us that love is the greatest lesson." He never stayed long. The bench didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to everyone who'd ever learned something in that park. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Daniel stayed behind after class. The park was quiet again, much like it had been on that first day years ago. He took out his old notebook, its corners frayed, the pages yellowed. On the last page he wrote a new line. Still teaching, still grateful. He closed it, placed it on the desk, and whispered, "Thank you, Anna. You were right. The world did need someone who shows up." The wind rustled the leaves, as if answering her name. The next morning, when the children arrived, Daniel wasn't there. At first, they thought he was late. Then Nora found him sitting peacefully by the chalkboard, eyes closed, a faint smile on his face. In his hand was a small piece of chalk, worn down almost to dust. Beside him, on the board, he had written his final words. "Keep learning. Keep loving." Silence fell over the park. Rosie began to cry softly. Nora knelt, touching the chalk. "He never stopped teaching," she whispered. "Not even at the end." The funeral was small but full of love. Parents, students, city workers, and strangers came to say goodbye. Colin stood in uniform, head bowed. Nora spoke last. "He taught us that education isn't about rules," she said. "It's about reaching hearts. And in that, Mr. Daniel Clark will never be gone." A gentle wind blew through the park, scattering a few petals from the flowers laid near his bench. For a moment, it almost felt like chalk dust dancing in the air. Weeks later, the new community center opened its doors, named the Daniel Clark Learning Foundation. On the wall hung his photo, a kind-eyed man with chalk on his fingers and light in his smile. Underneath were his words. He still carries the same piece of chalk in his pocket. It's small and worn out, but to him it's enough to draw a new beginning. And every child who walked in touched that photo before class, as if saying hello to the teacher who taught them all the most important lesson, that love, once given, never disappears.